for someone to do the requirements of our system used to cost around, close to $400 a person.
Okay.
For the requirement. So it's a federal requirement, it's a statutory, a law requirement, they have to do this thing. And it costs them about $400 a person to do that thing. And now agencies who are using our service, instead of $400 a person to do that thing, costs about $116 a person to do that thing.
Wow. I would eat that.
No, not the one that says I would eat that. Over the last 10 years, the program that I work in has saved the American people over $47 million. So that means between me and my singular coworker, we've saved the American people $4.7 million annually. So what I do saves the government $2.35 million every year.
Okay, how did you go from 2.35 to, or 4.7 to 2.35? Because you first said you saved 40.
35 and 35 is 7.
I'm so confused.
4.7 million.
Yes.
4,700,000.
Yes.
Right? Half of that is 2,300,050.
2.35 each.
Yeah.
Okay, I was like, man, you had me
Me alone, 2.35 million I saved the federal government.
And per year.
That's per year, or at least this last year. And we calculated the numbers based off of what it used to cost the government to do what we do. And every agency had to do it on their own, and then we took over it and we pay for it. Well, not we, but our agency pays for it. And the system runs so efficiently, and we have like a 96% rate of satisfaction for all of our users, which I think is pretty high. It saves the money for those other agencies because now they don't have to pay individual contracts for all those things to do it. It's actually another government agency that provides the service.
Each year, I mean, and like you're finding, and like, each year, do you find ways to like streamline it more, or is there just like only so much streamlining it can go?
I think there's only so much streamlining we can go. So basically crunching all the numbers, for someone to do the requirements of our system used to cost around, close to $400 a person. Okay. For the requirement. So it's a federal requirement, it's a statutory, a law requirement, they have to do this thing. And it costs them about $400 a person to do that thing. And now agencies who are using our service, instead of $400 a person to do that thing, costs about $116 a person to do that thing.
Wow.
Yeah, so basically we save the money by consolidating the effort and then making a usable system that is accessible to all the people who are required to use it and works effectively.
That's amazing.
Yeah. Yeah, it's pretty satisfying as far as like work is concerned.
Yeah.
To think that this responsibility has been given to you and then you do something that saves the government money. Yeah. It's a proof of efficiency.
That's so, okay.
Coincidentally, all the numbers are public too. You can look all the data up online. But I won't tell you who I work for.
So, interesting. So I just think, whenever we're talking about like, saving money and streamlining, I just think that there was like, there was an incident when I used to work for my federal agency, and I had learned how to do a requirement that was not being done because their thought was, we're not going to do it unless we get audited. but then I was going to be the person responsible for making sure it was done.
So if it wasn't done, it was your fault.
So if it wasn't done, it was my fault. So I went and I learned how to do it. I learned how, the requirements for it. And so I went in, and part of it was making our documents, our public documents, Section 508 compliant.
Yeah.
Section 508 compliance is where you make, it has to do with accessibility. And so it required, it was like all of our PDFs, all of our stuff had to be, like if somebody was using a reader to access our website, it all had to be accessible.
Yep.
Now the website kind of had that built in to it. However, PDFs weren't, and for various reasons. And so I learned how to make it happen.
How to do the 508 across all of it.
How to do the 508 compliance. And yes, sometimes because depending on the document that people gave me, it would sometimes require a little bit more work. Yeah. Or a little bit longer work. And I mean more work. But regardless, I learned how to do it, and I was doing that for all of our documents.
I apologize.
Yeah.
Just to shift just a little bit. Does it drive you crazy when people screw with templates for like a Word document?
Yes.
Or an Excel document? I will spend hours, it seems, fixing all of the borders to make sure that this document is set. And when you do a heading, it's actually a heading, and that way all my headings have the same font. Everything's set up the right way. So I do a lot of work to get my Word set up to where I don't have to recreate the wheel every time I start writing.
So,
and then I send my file away, and it comes back different.
In fact, I would like to say this. In fact, that was part of my responsibility at the last. Any public document that went out had to be what we call branded.
Yeah.
So it all had to look, uniform. And I created a template, and we sent it out to everybody in the agency. So it's saying like, if you're going to be doing a PowerPoint presentation, use this template. If you're doing a Word document, use this template.
Yeah.
And it would come back to me, nobody would use the freaking template.
It'd drive me nuts.
It would drive me nuts. And it was like, that was what's supposed to be opened up. Like we sent it through our IT to say, this is what needs to be opened up. When they open up Word to make a document, this is the template they need to use.
Yeah, this is so all the formatting was set in Word, pushed from information technology team to where somebody has to go in and change their settings and things to make it look different.
Yep. And so then I would have to go in, and when these documents went out, then I would have to go in and fix it and brand it. I
think that's everywhere though. I mean, we're not talking just federal. I mean, this is just a pet peeve between,
generally speaking, and especially whenever you're talking about something that needs to be branded, right? Yeah. So if it was just for shits and giggles, that'd be one thing. But this was how the agency needed to be presented to the public.
Yeah.
So back to the 508 compliance. So I went and I learned how to do this, and I spoke to somebody who was a contractor who went out, and that's what part of their job. Like when companies
like testing or doing.
When companies making things 508 compliant.
Okay.
So I went through our old files that was being put up, and I made them 508 compliant. And I had asked her, hey, if this was something that a federal agency would have to pay to do, or an agent, somebody what would be the cost? And we're talking about it in the millions. So I went through it, and on top of doing my regular day-to-day stuff, I went through and I started making all these documents Section 508 compliant. When it came to my review, I talked about how much I saved the government by doing this. Mm-hmm. I said, hey, I've saved us this many millions of dollars.
Yeah.
Just this year alone.
Yeah.
By doing this for you.
Yeah.
They didn't give a shit.
They don't care.
They didn't give a shit.
No, they weren't going to do it anyway.
They weren't going to do it
until they got caught not doing it.
Yeah, and then they would worry about it, and then it would have been me. that would have to have gone back and fixed it. Or they could have paid somebody millions of dollars.
And let me guess, the people who didn't want to do it were politicals. Some of them?
Some of it.
Okay.
So the person who really didn't know, when she's just like, well, you know, like her thought was always, we'll worry about it when we get audited. And I want to do something right the first time, so it's not a matter of going back and jumping through my ass to get it done, because that's dumb.
Yeah. So
and a waste.
Yeah, it is. Actually, I kind of tie that to some of my military training, or just working with the military, whether you're a civilian employee or a service member working with the military. My coworker right now has experience with the military, and we are constantly, as we're working, thinking, who's next? What's coming up? Do we need, what's the plan? So we're constantly, like, we're always getting ready for the next enemy attack on our base. Like, it's basically what we're doing. We're doing constant improvement of our fighting positions, like always. We're always constantly improving our position. So when something pops off, we're ready to execute at like 75%. You know, 70%, even though we don't have the full plan, we're ready for that last minute emergency. And I get the impression that some of the people who I've worked with over the years, they really are. They're just like waiting. And they're not planning or coordinating anything. You know, they're just waiting for whatever to happen.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then they go into vapor lock.
Yeah, and to me, I'm like, I don't want to, like, if I know something's supposed to be, I don't want to live with that thought of like, well, that's something I'm going to have to take care of. I'm like,
right.
I have ADHD, right? So I want to make sure that if I know to do something, I got to take care of it now, or else, number one, I will go into vapor lock whenever it becomes, you know, or it just becomes, everything becomes, I don't want to live a life in crisis.
Right? I don't want to live in a life in crisis. I don't want to live a life in crisis. Anyway, yeah, that is...
and that's how I think, that's how I feel. I'm like...
When an email comes in, if I'm not already doing something else, I try to get it done now.
Yeah.
I don't want to do it later. I do it now. And if I can't do it now, I mark the email as unread, so I don't forget it. You know? And I have a crazy color code system. So if, you know, Bob emails me, you know, Bob's are blue, and...
Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think...
Jodie's are Jello colored.
Cherry flavored?
Sure.
Or is it red for cherry flavored Jello?
Yeah. Cherries.
So yeah, so that's how I feel. You know, I don't want to live like that. I don't want, you know, especially in a work environment, man. There's enough chaos and crisis everywhere else. And especially in a position where there shouldn't be.
Right.
You know, where that expectation, like, you know, where
some jobs don't come with emergencies.
Some jobs don't come with emergencies, and I don't want it to be.
Yeah. Some jobs do have emergencies.
And that's
like life or death.
And you understand that going into it.
Well, you know, I think there's kind of a working in a job now that doesn't experience emergencies. It's kind of like this steady road, right? But when you work in a job that's emergencies, or that has emergencies in there, you perform, execute, you know, at the emergency level. And then sometimes you execute so long at the emergency level, you drop down below normal performance, and you got to kind of come back up. But the emergency peaks are generally, if you're properly staffed, spread out enough to where you're not necessarily in constant crisis.
Yeah.
But then there are other jobs that are real low speed that you can establish some sort of, you know, call it battle rhythm. You establish a battle rhythm, the process of doing these things, but it can get bad by like the wrong person, you know? My coworker was telling me today that they went somewhere and a new boss showed up. You know, so it's a military assignment. So a new, you know, leader comes into the organization, and this leader was an attorney. not to speak bad on attorneys, but didn't have an awful lot of leadership experience, and wanted to review 100% of everything that came in and out of the office. So the office before that leader arrived was operating pretty smooth because they had good middle management and things were effective. And then the new leader, who probably had a bad, middle management before, came in and was like, no, I need to see everything. And basically somebody had to pull him to the side and go, hey, you need to trust this team until they prove they can't be trusted.
Yeah. I think, so I think that that's part of, you have to trust that your teams know what they're doing, right? Until there's reason for it not to. And then it's not the entire team and it's not everything.
Right.
Right. So if there is something that's like, I must say, like coming in from the outside, coming in and first, I would say you got to just be observant, right? It doesn't mean you have to get your hands into everything. It means you have to kind of see what's going on. And then, there could be places where you could see areas of improvement or, streamline. And that's because you kind of get, you get into, the team could be in a routine doing what they need to do. And I could see, then that go, hey, or, hey, can you walk me through how you as a team do this?
Yep.
Right? Or how the process. And I could see that. But just to go in and start bulldozing, and that's kind of how I feel. If you want to see everything, it's just like, can you trust me to do my fucking job?
Right.
And if you can't trust me to do my fucking job, then that's a problem. That's demoralizing.
Yeah, well, yeah, it is. Yeah, I didn't mean for that to be relevant.
And this is the part of the video where I tell you to subscribe, like, and follow along, and leave a comment below.